Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Well, doggone it, here we are at my third video of the season and we still have snow on the ground and there's no warm up in sight. So this is making it really challenging to do the outdoor stuff. Now today's topic for my column is raised bed gardening, and so I had fully intended to bring you out here to show you our raised bed garden setup and also to show you how to make a simple raised bed. Well, that's not going to happen. Fortunately, I do have a good indoor topic this week, and that is Seed Starting 101. And that is such an important topic, so let's head inside. So why is seed starting so important? Well, for one thing, it's a very important skill to have. You really need to know how to start your own plants from seed. For another, it helps you save money because seed packets are really quite inexpensive when you consider how many plants you can start from those seeds. And also, it helps you grow unusual varieties that are really hard to find at garden centers. Let's talk about supplies first. Now, if you go to a garden center, what you're going to want is a flat that does not have any holes in the bottom, and then you're going to want some kind of an insert that does have holes for drainage because drainage is really important. So here is an example of a flat insert. You can see on the bottom side there are holes, and this has all sorts of cells. They're very small holes. You can also get something like this that has really big areas for roots. This is called a deep root insert, and it's something that you would grow seedlings that have large root systems such as pumpkins, squash, melons, beans, corn, or peas if you choose to start these indoors. Now there are other types of inserts and they come with perforations between them. So you can get a whole insert that's just this size. You'll notice it has really large cells, which is nice. You can get them in all sorts of configurations. Here's one that just has 2 cells. Those are really good sizes. Here's one that has 1 cell. And again, it's a whole sheet of them with perforations in between. And you can tell I have been sort of mixing and matching mine. They come in 3s, 4s, 6s. It's really impressive. So these are all very important, and they should all have holes in the bottom for drainage. If you decide not to go the route of going to a garden center, you can certainly use egg cartons you would plant in the bottom, which works really well. You could take a milk carton when it's empty, this one isn't, and you would cut it so that you could start seeds in the bottom of it. You could use flower pots, a window box, those clear clamshell containers, like if you buy a salad at the grocery store, something like that. All of those would work really well, but drainage is so important. So remember that if you're using something that doesn't have holes in it, make some holes. You also will need something that will increase the humidity around your seedling flat so that the seeds will germinate or sprout. What I use is a clear plastic dome lid, which you can find at garden centers. But if you don't have one, you could certainly use a clear plastic bag and put it around the seedling flat, or you could take a sheet of clear plastic wrap and set it on the surface of the soil, again to increase the humidity. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention is that if you buy a seed starting kit from a garden center, which is usually a flat, an insert, and a lid, a lot of times the lids that come with them are kind of flimsy, I have to admit, and they crack easily. And so what I did is I went to our garden center and they have some nice heavy duty lids, and I think it cost me like $3, and this is going to last for a very long time. It is nice and strong. So that's something you might want to take into consideration. Okay. Another supply you really are going to need is a soilless potting mix. And so this is not a very glamorous shot here, but this is germination mix, and it's also referred to as seed starting mix. It is a sterile potting mix that is ideal for starting seeds because it's very light and fluffy and it holds moisture well. The other things you could use would be a regular potting mix, but I really recommend going organic if you can, especially if you're growing edible crops. Now, what about using garden soil instead of going and buying some potting soil or germination mix? Well, using garden soil is really not that good of an idea. Why? For one thing, it's hard to keep it evenly moist and it compacts a lot. But the other thing is that garden soil can contain disease pathogens, and that can make it really risky for your seedlings because they might be contaminated with that particular disease. So I really do not recommend using garden soil at all. You're certainly going to need seed packets, right? Duh. But I wanted to mention that they are a great source for information. Usually on the back of the packet, it will tell you when to start them, whether to start them directly in the garden or indoors ahead of time, how deeply to plant them, how much to space them, and so on. And so all of this information will really help you out. Now, if you live in a temperate climate, it's very important that you know when your last anticipated date of frost is in the spring, because most seed packets will say either something like plant in the garden after all danger of frost is past, and so you need to grab a calendar and work backwards to figure out the ideal time for planting your seeds. I wanted to mention one more thing about seeds before we move on, because it's really important. Not a lot of gardeners know about it, yet it has a huge impact on your germination rate, which is the number of seeds out of what you planted that actually sprout. It applies to large, irregularly shaped seeds of certain types of vegetable crops. So things like beans, melons, squash, pumpkins, and cucumbers. They have an odd shape. Now, if you think about a seed as being a little packet of energy, it needs to send a root down and a sprout up. On those irregularly shaped seeds, if they are upside down, the plant has to use that really important energy in order to right itself so that, again, it can send the root down and the sprout up. A lot of times, seeds use up all of that energy righting themselves or orienting themselves, and they die. So we don't want that to happen. Let me show you up close what I'm talking about so that you know how to do this. So here are some examples of what I'm talking about. These are pole bean seeds, but it would also apply to bush bean seeds. If you look at the seed, it has a rounded edge, and then at the middle of the opposite side, there's what a person might call an indentation, a belly button, a scar, something like that. So when you're planting bean seeds, plant them with that scar or belly button or indentation facing downward, and you will get awesome germination. Here is an example of pumpkin seeds, but this would also apply to winter squash seeds like kabocha or butternut squash. It would also apply to zucchini seeds, patty pan seeds, crookneck squash, and so on. So you'll notice there is a rounded end and a pointed end. A rounded end and a pointed end. That pointed end gets planted facing downward so that they sprout more easily. And then I forgot to mention corn earlier. It also has a large, irregularly shaped seed. You'll notice there's kind of a rounded end and a pointed end. Here's the pointed end, here's the rounded end. And guess what? The pointed end gets planted facing downward, and they will sprout great. Now, orienting seeds correctly also applies to melon and cucumber seeds, but I wanted to point out that they are a little trickier to see. They tend to be kind of a slimmer seed, but usually you can tell that there is a pointed end and a somewhat rounded end. So I would always plant the pointed end facing downward. Now there's one step that I go to that I think a lot of gardeners aren't aware of, and I wanted to make sure you know about it, and that is to use finely milled sphagnum moss. This is something that naturally inhibits the development of a nasty fungal disease called damping off syndrome, which can wipe out a flat of seedlings like you would not believe. It's awful. So this is dried moss. Like I said, it's a natural inhibitor of this fungus, and you can find it in large, well-stocked garden centers. You can even ask them to get you some, or you can find it online. Finely milled sphagnum moss. Now, it is not expensive, and it will last you forever. I've had this bag since 2000. It doesn't go bad, and you just sprinkle the tiniest little bit over the flat, and it works great. So it's definitely worth the effort. Now, when it comes to watering seedlings, I use something a little different, and I always get asked about it, so I'm answering it right here. So this is obviously just a pop bottle. And I have these things called bottle top waterers. They're a screw-on lid. This one has really fine holes in it, so it mists the plants very lightly, which is awesome. It does come with different tops though. And so you just screw it onto the pop bottle. You know, you've filled it with water, or you can even do a light fertilizer mix, and that works great too. But these are awesome. I have gotten these online. You get usually 3 or 4 in a set. They're inexpensive. Just do a web search on bottle top waterers and you will find them. They are great. Now, unless you have a fantastic memory, it's probably a good idea to label your plantings. You can get plant tags at garden centers. You can make your own if you have an old window blind, and just cut them into little lengths and label them that way. You can also use either masking tape or painter's tape, write on it what you planted, and stick that onto the side of the flat. Works great. Now, when it comes to fertilizer, I highly recommend using a liquid nitrogen fertilizer, and I use fish emulsion. This is something that is kind of a gooey, almost like a paste, and you dilute it in water. But what I do for seedlings, which I fertilize when they have a couple of true leaves, which are their mature leaves, is I dilute it at half strength. So if the label says, for example, 1 tablespoon to a gallon of water, I do half a tablespoon to a gallon of water. And that way, because the seedlings are kind of small and delicate, I'm giving them a light feeding. And then the other thing that you're going to need are some pots. If you're starting things like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, or artichokes, where they need to grow for a while, you don't want to leave those little seedlings in those little flats that you started them in. And so they will need to be up potted, which means transplanting them into a larger size pot so their roots have a lot more room to grow. If you have a grow light, that is absolutely the ideal because it's good concentrated light. If you don't have one, you can certainly start your seeds on a sunny windowsill, but you need to know that they can get chilly during the late winter months, and so it is not perfect, but it's certainly doable. This is one of my grow light setups, and here is the other. This one is a stack and grow setup from Gardener's Supply, and it has LED lights in it. The other one just uses regular fluorescence. Pre-moisten your seed starting or germination mix with enough water so that it feels lightly moist. What you're looking for is the amount of moisture you would expect to feel in a wrung out sponge. You definitely don't want it to be sopping wet. Fill your seedling flat inserts with about 2 inches of the germination mix. Press it down with your fingers so that it's a little more compact. plant your seeds at the depth indicated on the seed packet. In this case, this is purple of Sicily cauliflower, which I'm really excited about. You can see the seeds are quite small, and the packet says to plant them at 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. And I'm going to plant 1 seed per cell because I know these plants are going to have to grow for a little bit before they have to go out into the garden. You'll notice that I stopped filling the potting mix in the container at about the depth I was going to need to plant, because now that my seeds are in, I'm going to fill the rest of the way on top. Finish filling each cell so that the right amount of soil is on top of it. Lightly water the seeds in. You see how great this bottle top waterer works. Now you want one, don't you? Sprinkle a very light layer of finely milled sphagnum moss on the surface of the soil. Don't forget to label your plantings. Cover your flat with a clear dome lid, or wrap the flat in a plastic bag that's clear, or place some clear plastic wrap on the surface of the potting mix. Place the flat under a light source, and I'll be lowering this one so it's just about 1 inch above the dome. Now consider getting yourself a timer so that you don't have to manually turn the light on and off each day. Once the majority of your seedlings have sprouted, I would go ahead and remove the lid. Keep a close eye on the soil moisture and water as needed, because remember, it should stay lightly moist. Once your seedlings have some true leaves, remember those are the mature leaves, you want to fertilize them with a half-strength fish fertilizer or other type of nitrogen fertilizer. That will help them put on a lot of growth. I would do this about every 2 weeks. For seedlings that take a while to grow, such as tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, broccoli, cauliflower, artichokes, and so on, you will need to up-pot them once the seedlings have a pair or two of true leaves, the mature leaves. This means carefully moving them to a larger pot so their roots will have room to grow. When you transplant your seedlings, it's so important that you handle them gently because they are very delicate. Never pull them up by their main stem, because that crushes the cells that transport moisture and nutrients. So it makes it very difficult for them to do that, or impossible, which means they will die. And you certainly don't want that after all of your TLC. So what I like to do is to take either a slot screwdriver or a chopstick and just insert it into the outer edge of the cell and gently lift everything up to transplant them. There is one last step that is so important to the health of your seedlings, because after all, you just put a lot of time and effort into them, didn't you? So you want them to succeed outside. That last step is called hardening off. And what it does is it acclimates a seedling to the intensity of the sunlight and the temperatures outdoors. So how do you do it? What you do is you take your seedlings out the first day, just for an hour, and put them in kind of a filtered area so that they don't get too much sunlight. Leave them out for an hour, bring them back inside. The next day, do the same thing, but for 2 hours, and just keep increasing the time over 1 week's time. By the end of that week, they will be acclimated to the sunlight and the temperatures. Now, if you don't do this, there can be bad consequences. Plants can get sunburn just like humans, and you can tell they're sunburned because their leaves turn white. And so the plants can either die or they really struggle. So hardening off your seedlings is the last important step, and it is absolutely crucial to them doing well in your garden. Okay, that is everything about seed starting. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know. You can reach me at susan@susansinthegarden.com. Also, if you go to my website and look under the guides menu, you will see a seed starting scheduler, and you will also see information on starting vegetable crops, whether you live in zone 9 or zone 3. So be sure to check those out because they will be helpful. And also I have a list of what I'm growing this year in case you're interested. All right, I'll see you next week. Think sunshine, no snow, and hopefully we'll be out in the garden again.